Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live webinar. My name is Neill, and I'm the founder of the Unlimited 2016 conference. And I also act as the host for this webinar. This is the first in a series of pre-conference webinars that I intend to do with the speakers of the upcoming conference, which is to be held in Helsinki on the 24th and 25th of September. And in this first webinar, I have the honor to be joined by Neill, all the way from Los Angeles, right?
Well, that's where I am.
Yeah, so, and I'm here in Helsinki, so.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really cool, it's really cool, I like it. So welcome, Michael, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to give a little bit of background for the people who may not know you. I'm sure there are many people watching this either live or watching this as a replay who are very familiar with the work you do and the stuff that you put out there. So Michael is a coach and a very world-renowned coach, speaker, and also an author of several books. Maybe most notably, at least for me, the Inside Out Revolution, which was one of my first introductions into the inside out understanding of the human experience, which is the kind of foundation for the Unlimited 2016 conference as well, and for the work that Michael does, and also the work that I do as a coach. And yeah, so I first heard about you maybe 2 years ago when someone recommended the book The Inside Out Revolution for me, and I read I ordered it on Amazon and I read it, and then I read it again straight after, and then I waited maybe for a week and read it for the third time. I don't know, there's just something there that really kind of resonated with me, and now, what's really cool is that you published a new book, which did it come out today?
Came out today. That's right.
Yeah, and I have it. I don't know if you have a copy there, but I have one here.
Yeah, I'll do mine.
Yeah, this is the preview version, so it's not the actual with the hardcovers. I was very fortunate to get this from you, so thank you very much for sending this.
No, you're welcome. I'm glad it got to you in time.
Yeah, it did. I haven't finished the whole book. I've read, well, I think I have like 2 or 3 chapters left. I've really taken my time with it because it's not really a book which you read to get to the end, to get to the end and see, you know, what's the big.
Yeah, there's no surprise. You don't find out who did it at the end.
Yeah. So I'm taking my time, but I'm really been enjoying it, and yeah, it's been really good. And you know, when I asked you, if you're up for this webinar, and you said yes, and we were kind of sending some emails back and forth, talking about what could be the topic, the title plan first. But then I read a chapter that was titled "How to Be More of Who You Really Are," and I remember it was quite late in the night, and it was quite late in the night. I finished the chapter and I thought, whoa, this could work really well as a live conversation as well. So I immediately sent you an email. Can we use this? And you said, yes, let's do it. So that's why we ended up with this particular title. Actually, I wanted to ask you something about the book, because obviously I've been reading it and I have some kind of impression what the book is about, but I'm really curious to hear from you. You know, what is the book all about, and why did you write it?
Well, a lot of people who've read The Inside Out Revolution have asked me that, because they said, well, you said it really well here. Why would you say it again? And I think for me, it was always part of the way I've talked about this understanding has always had 3 components: of philosophical, spiritual, and practical. Because I think that's, this is a philosophical conversation about the nature of life. It's also a spiritual conversation about our deeper nature. And it's also a practical conversation about how can we be more effective in the world. And so for me, the Inside Out Revolution really just focused on the fundamental understanding that we live in the feeling of our thinking, not the feeling of our circumstances. That our experience of life is created from the inside out. The mind works more like a projector than a camera, and all the implications spiritually and practically of that. In the space within, I wanted to really point to the spiritual component and really point to, well, when people wake up to their deeper capacity for experience, their deeper capacity for life, who they are before the particular thinking that makes their personalities, who they are, who we are before the things that make us different. It wakes us up to something inside us that allows us to live our lives with more grace and more ease and often a lot more joy. And so that's what the space within is about. That's why I wrote it, is to really wake people up to that aspect of themselves that most people have touched, but they either made up a story about it and okay, I need to go through these rituals or these routines in order to experience it, or they kind of just thought, well, that was a neat experience, and then carried on with their lives as if nothing happened. And so it really is just pointing to tapping into your spiritual nature, your innate health, your innate well-being, this deeper part of you, this deeper potential in you. It's the keys to the kingdom. It's the whole game in one go.
If someone is kind of listening to this and now wants to read the book, would you recommend that people read the Inside Out Revolution first, or can people jump right in?
No, I deliberately, I mean, people will tell me, because the book only came out today. So to be fair, less than 50 people have read it before today. So I can't tell you factually, but I definitely wrote it so that you could start with either book. And in fact, there's a third book coming out next year called Creating the Impossible, which will be the third in the trilogy. And each one is designed so that you could read it first. They do build, in other words, if you read both or all three, it will create a more full picture, but they're designed to be read individually as well.
All right, that's cool. Just a couple of things that I kind of forgot to say in the introduction. The first thing is that, I mentioned the conference, the Unlimited conference. We're going to be talking about talking more about that towards the end of this hour. So if you're interested in hearing that, we're going to tackle the conference later. And the other thing is that if at any point you have any questions or comments, you can use the box on the right side of the screen and just type them in there. There are people already have been using that. So just so you know. So the chapter, how to be more of who you really are, it's really interesting because right kind of in the beginning of that, you talk about how when you work as a coach, you're coaching someone, a client, there are two questions in your mind that kind of guide you when you work with your client. And the first one is, do they know where their experience is coming from? And the second one is, do they know their God? And I thought it would be interesting to have a little chat about these two things, because I think they're the kind of key to what we're talking about. And also thinking about the conference in September, this is kind of into at the very foundation of that conference and what the speakers there and what we're going to be talking about in September. So just taking the first question first, do they know where their experience is coming from? And you talk a little bit about that, but can you just kind of elaborate that a bit more and maybe say, like, why is it important to know?
Well, it turns out to be ridiculously important, because we spend an inordinate amount of our time trying to control the world to have a better experience of it. So we try to have a different amount of money because we think we'll enjoy life more with a different amount of money. Or we try to find just the right person to spend our time with because that will create our experience of life. Or we need to find the perfect job because that will create our experience of life. Or we need to get our thinking right. We need to think the right thoughts because that will create our experience of life. Or we need the right politicians in power because that's creating our experience of life. And so most of our energy is spent trying to control the world outside of us in hopes that if we can get the world right, we'll be right. And when you see that your experience is always and only being created by thought in the moment, by the interplay between thought and mind and consciousness, between the projector, the film, and the screen, then you suddenly realize, well, the world's going to do its thing. And I can sometimes affect it and sometimes not. But my experience is carrying on independent of that. And not only is it carrying on independent of that, I don't even need to choose what to think because I can't. I mean, I can, you don't know what you're going to be thinking 5 minutes from now, and neither do I. So that's really not on the table. But that there's a self-correcting mechanism to thought that left to its own devices, we actually get appropriate thought. We get the thoughts that we need at the time that we need them. And the reason that doesn't happen all the time is because we work so hard to get it right that in fact the system can't correct. So I tell the story in the Inside Out Revolution. A friend of mine told me about his getting a pilot's license. You have to, the final exam, as it were, is you have to stall the plane in midair and then restart the engine. And that's to kind of ensure that you would be safe. And his friend was flying a plane called a Piper Cub that had it has a gyroscope in it. So the plane is designed that when you let go of the controls, it levels out. And when it levels out, you can restart the engine. Well, this guy's on his first solo flight. I think he was 19 years old, and he panics because he stalls the plane, and then it starts to go down. And he calls to the tower, Mayday, Mayday! I can't level out the plane. And the guy goes, let go of the controls. He goes, no, you don't understand. It's a matter of life and death. I'm going down. And the guy goes, it's a matter of life and death. Let go of the controls. And of course, he finally does. Plane levels out. He's able to restart the engine. Well, that's how the mind works. When we let go of it, when we give ourselves freedom of mind, freedom of thought, our thinking levels out. We get healthier and healthier thoughts that are more and more responsive to the actual situations we're in. And so there's a kind of a kindness to the design. The mind is designed for success. It's designed to work in our favor, but we kind of think we've got to do it. And that's where we get ourselves into a lot of trouble.
There are a couple of questions coming in. Can you see them on your screen?
Yes.
So do you want to maybe tackle some of those?
Well, okay. So let's take Carla. How do you deal with money worries? They're causing me huge distress. No matter how positive I am, it still doesn't help my money worries. Well, so first off, Carla, welcome to the human condition, right? I think if we polled everyone who is watching this video right now, you would get at least half of the people saying they have money worries and the other half saying they don't at the moment, but they might again tomorrow. But the reason that it looks like we have money worries or health worries or relationship worries is because we don't understand how worry works. And the way worry works is we have a thought and it looks real to us. It looks important. It looks significant. So we have a thought, oh God, money is my livelihood. And if I don't have money, I'm going to die. And we create these extraordinary detailed fantasies about the role money plays in our life, the role it should play in our life, who we are in relation to money. And then inside that landscape, we try to do our best to make more of it. Well, you've kind of lost before you started. So whatever your worries are, whether they're seem to be about money or about some other aspect of life, if you can pull back for a minute and just kind of open yourself back up to being wrong about everything you think about money, that maybe money isn't what you think it is. Maybe the world doesn't work the way you think it is. I know that may seem like, well, no, I just want to get my worries under control. No. Your worries only make sense in the world you've already made up in your head. So there's something about turning the page. In the book, I have a whole section on a fresh start. Sid Banks, who kind of first articulated the principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, his first book was called Second Chance. And it's pointing to, whether a second chance or a fresh start, the capacity we have to think again. We're not stuck with the thinking we have done up until this point in time. We can turn the page moment by moment and get brand new thinking from this deeper part of ourselves, from this space within, from this spiritual wisdom that will completely change the way the world looks to us. And when the world doesn't look scary, we don't feel scared. So it's not exactly a sort of a push button how-to, but if you're willing to be wrong, if you're willing to open back up and really just ask of your mind to, what else have you got? Because the thinking you're giving me right now is creating a really terrible experience and it's not helping. Your mind will oblige and you'll start to get better and better thinking. And if you don't like the next thought that comes along, wait a minute, because there'll be another one after that. And at some point, you get an insight. Things look different than they did before. And even though nothing's changed yet in the outside, your whole experience is different on the inside. And then, if there's anything to be done to bring more money in or to do things differently with money, it will be almost obvious to you what to do. But when you're in the worry state of mind, whether it's about money or health or whatever, all you're going to get is more of the same. So I don't know if that addresses it as asked, but that would be my response.
Well, it would be great to hear from you, Carla. Just type in what you took from that, and if you think that if you think that Michael kind of nailed it with his answer or not, we're very curious to hear. Then the other thing is I've lost the question now on my screen, but there was a question about very intense feeling.
About the intensity of feelings, yeah.
Intensity of feelings. So when we're kind of really caught up in some intense discomfort, whatever that is, kind of like, well, I don't remember now what the actual question was.
Well, so the question is, I can see at least part of it. What I really want to know is how to diffuse the phenomenal intensity of certain thought, feeling-based experience so as to no longer be so tired, ill, etc. So the reason that our feelings get so intense sometimes is inevitably because we're trying not to have them. So I used to work a lot with people who had panic attacks. And what I discovered was a panic attack almost always follows the same form, where somebody has had a bad experience. And the next time they feel like they're going to have that bad experience, they try to slam on the brakes in their mind to prevent them from having that experience again. And of course, what it does is it blocks the flow of thought. It makes the whole thing seem more and more solid and more real, and we get lost in it. It would be like watching a horror movie and thinking that it was real. When you're in it, it seems absolutely hopeless. And of course, it just builds on itself because we start thinking about the implications. And then what if this happens? And what if it never ends? And what if I'm not able to avoid it? And I've got it. And literally we turn what could have been a passing thought into a mountain. I was talking to a client earlier today, and he actually used a very funny phrase. He said, "So what you're saying is fear has breasts." I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, but for the fact that it catches my eye, a fearful thought is no more powerful than any other thought. But because it catches my eye, it's like, ooh, what's that?" Suddenly it becomes a thing in my mind. So part of it is simply to see that that's all that's happening. I say all, I know when you're in it, all isn't, it's not comforting necessarily to know that it's a thought, except for the fact that nothing made of thought is permanent. The nature of thought is to come and go. Thought is inherently ephemeral. So whatever you're feeling now, however intense the feeling, the moment your thinking changes, the feeling will change with it. It will dissipate. And you don't have to do that. In fact, you're trying to do that is what's so tiring, because you're fighting the flow. It's like standing in a river trying to hold back the water. It's exhausting. If you let it flow, it feels like you're going to get drowned or you're going to get carried away. But in fact, what you just find is you wind up refreshed, because fresh, new thought starts to come through. The other thing, and it's a funny thing to say, but I've offered for 26 years now a money-back guarantee to anyone whose head explodes as a result of their feelings. And even though people will often say, well, it feels like my head's going to explode, it's never going to happen. Part of what happens with us human beings is we get scared of our experience. We get scared that it's always going to be this way, or it's only going to get worse. And there's a quote I use at the beginning of the Inside Out Revolution from Sid Banks: if the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their own experience, that alone would change the world. Because if it's okay for you to be really scared when you're really scared, and really angry when you're really angry, and really sad when you're really sad, those feelings will come and go. If it's not okay with you, well, now you're in it. And at some level, you got to find a way to see it for what it is. And when you do, you won't be so tired because you're not fighting the flow anymore.
I think you said or raised a very good point there. Because sometimes when people come across this understanding, and this happened to me as well, so I can speak from my own personal experience, I kind of like, when I started to watch these videos and talk to you people, and I got the impression that when you get this, you're gonna be like just flowing all the time and happy 24/7 or something like that. Nothing ever bothers you because you just know it's taught or whatever. But it seems to me that you can't really escape being human.
Well, no, and in fact, that I think is the most powerful and unexpected benefit of this understanding. So I love Renata's response by way, oh crap, it makes sense. We'll try and trust that the discomfort will not necessarily become disease. No, not try, we'll trust. And actually, okay, I know spent years waiting for the head bomb to implode too. Your contribution helped me on a path from severe dissociation to a lighter diagnosis of anxiety, a pretty fabulous outcome after 50 years. So that's fantastic, Renata. So one of the sort of real unexpected gifts, as I say, of this understanding is not that you become superhuman, but that actually you just become human. Like you start to realize, oh, me too. So I say in the book, I give the analogy, if you go to a therapist or a self-help guru and you say, oh, my marriage is a bit ropey right now and I'm worried about money. Well, the therapist will kind of help you find where that pattern originated maybe, and help you work to undo whatever the inciting incident in the past was, and help you come to terms with and make peace with that, in the hopes that that will affect your behavior in the future. The self-help guru will probably share their top techniques for making money, or their 5 strategies to a happy marriage, and you'll do your best to kind of follow them, and hopefully that will help. Somebody who's insightfully seen that we live in the feeling of our thinking, not the feeling of the world. If you tell them, boy, my marriage is a bit ropey right now, I'm struggling financially, they'll go, oh, me too. Anyways, what do you want to talk about? Because they get, that's just one of the thought-created experiences that we have from moment to moment. That's part of the flow of life. And when that's not a problem, because it's not permanent, it's ephemeral, it's transient, it comes and it goes, you tap back into, you almost fall back into that deeper place of peace inside yourself. And there's a Chinese proverb that I love: there is chaos under the heavens, and the situation is excellent.
So we have a lot of questions coming in. I think I've been reading them, and I kind of noticed the common theme coming up, which is that, it's all good and well, but there's this thing, there's money, there's relationships, or there's a question about being overweight and kind of dealing with that. And I think from my short experience with this stuff. It always seems like everyone has, that one thing that's kind of.
Yeah, I used to say everything is made of thought, but money and my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think we have enough time to tackle each one of these issues. So rather, I was thinking if we could kind of, well, you've been talking to this already, but just kind of a bit more talk about, there's some, if in your life, you have an understanding of the principles, but then you're in your life and there's something, and it doesn't seem like that something is coming from you. It seems like that something is causing your experience.
So let me give you an example of that I think is going to address that kind of but.
Yeah.
Right. So, and before I do, let me just point to we call it the three principles. And the reason we call them principles is because we are asserting in teaching this is true. Like gravity works whether you believe in it or not. Right. If it's not like, if you've ever watched the cartoons where like the Roadrunner, the Wile E. Coyote runs off the edge of the cliff and he keeps running in the air and then he looks down and then he falls. Right. No, gravity doesn't work like that. You fall the second you go off the edge. Well, thought and the way that it works with consciousness and this energy of life to create experience, that's just how it works. Now, whether you like it or not, whether you think it should work that way or not, whether you think you can affect that or not, gravity doesn't care, right? The principles don't care. But you will have a completely different experience when you start to see what's really going on. So the example I wanted to give was when my wife first got pregnant. I came from a small town in America where basically around 17, 18, 19, kids got each other pregnant and started living for the next generation. And so I grew up determined that I was going to be the next generation that everybody had been living for and get the hell out. And so in my mind, the worst thing that could happen was for you to get somebody pregnant, because then your life was over. So I was happily married. I met my wife quite young. We met when we were 21. And when I was just about to open, I was an actor and I was about to open in my first play in the West End in London. And my wife came to the dressing room and told me she was pregnant. Now in my mind, forget outside in, forget inside out, forget any of this. I actually literally phoned the suicide hotline and they said, "How can we help?" And I said, "My wife just told me that she's pregnant." And the guy's like, "Congratulations." And I'm like, if congratulations were in order, do you think I'd be calling you? But I was so sure that my life was over, that my career was over, that I needed to become a plumber. I don't know why. Well, I kind of do. I had a neighbor who was a plumber who had 14 kids, but like, I just was sure that this was it. But here's the thing. I was also pretty sure I'm an idiot. So even though I was absolutely sure that this was terrible and the worst thing that could happen and my life was over, I kind of know that I'm wrong a lot. So for the whole time that my wife was pregnant, it wasn't that bad, even though if you'd asked me, I would have passed a lie detector that my life was over and my career was over. Well, when my son was born, it took less than 30 seconds for me to fall into the deepest feeling of love and peace I had felt in my entire life. And I suddenly realized, oh, this doesn't change the nappies. This doesn't change the amount of sleep I'm not going to be getting for the next couple of years. This doesn't change the amount of money I'm going to have to come up with to feed my family over the next time. But actually, I don't care, because this deeper feeling of love and peace is really what it's all about for me. And in that moment, my understanding shifted in the language of the space within and the stuff we're going to be talking about at the conference. I had a shift in consciousness. I suddenly saw things from a higher level, and my entire experience changed with it. And I've wound up loving having had a couple more kids. They're, that boy is graduating from college in a month from now. And what it is just recognizing that no matter how real it works, reality only works one way, inside out. No matter how sure you are that this is different and this is an exception, you can be even more sure that you're wrong. The system only works one way. Thought creates experience. Thought creates feeling. That which is projected creates the image on the screen. It can't work any other way. And when you start to see that for yourself, don't believe me, but the more you look, the more you'll see, because it's true. Gravity only works one way. Experience only works one way. So even when, and maybe especially when, you're sure you found the exception, you can be even more sure that you're wrong.
So I really want to hear about this second, because I mentioned that there were two questions when you're coaching a client that's in the back of your mind. And the first one was, do they know where their experience is coming from? And the second one, which kind of speaks to our title as well, do they know their God? Now, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I know. That's sort of a controversial way of saying it. But what I'm pointing to, I'm not trying to be religious. I'm not trying to be anything like that. It actually came from a conversation I had with a guy named Mark Howard, who was a therapist, worked for one of the big hospitals in the United States, is an award-winning therapist. And he used to specialize in helping executives get off cocaine. When he first learned this understanding that I share in the Inside Out Revolution and Space Within, and we'll be sharing at the conference, that was his thing. And he was kind of quite proud of himself. You know, like, look what I can do. And one of his teachers came to him and said, well, that's great that you're helping people with their addictions, but do they know that they're God? And Mark told me it hit him like a ton of bricks, because he suddenly realized he was completely closed off to what was really possible for people. He could help them have a little bit better life. He could help them be happier caterpillars. But was he actually helping them to become butterflies, to become what was really inside them? I sometimes say, look, you can either redecorate the inside of your egg, or you can hatch. And hatching, that transformation from caterpillar to butterfly, from what you appear to be to what you really are, it's something that it's in us already. And it seems to awaken as we awaken to it. So it's almost, as long as I think I'm a caterpillar, I can keep doing caterpillar stuff for a long time, and I can become a super caterpillar. I can learn strategies for successful caterpillarness, and how caterpillars win, and read all these great self-help books for caterpillars. But the second that I feel the butterfly that wants to come out, and I might feel it initially, I won't know what that feeling is. It might feel like a longing, like a, is that all there is feeling? Like there's got to be more to it than this. But at some point, I start to follow that. I start to wake up to that. And what that is that's the energy of life itself. So when I say, do they know that they're God? What I'm pointing to is, do they know that they're part of the spiritual intelligence of life? That the same thing that makes trees grow, that makes cuts heal, that makes hearts beat, is making us alive. And it does something for a person to feel that inside themselves. I talk about it in the book as being like a live wire. It would be like if a wire could become aware of the electricity running through it. When we become aware of this spiritual intelligence, this deeper feeling, this deeper energy of life running through us, our experience of life changes in a heartbeat. We're filled with peace and love and joy and all these deeper feelings that make life, no matter how awkward the circumstances might be, it makes it actually quite easy to bear. Because you can't escape the human condition, but you can thrive in the face of it.
I'm kind of speechless here, just listening to you. Oh, I don't know. should we tackle some more questions, or
Sure.
is there any more you want to say about that point? Or?
No, I'm always happy to do questions. Let's just David. Hi, Michael. Congrats on the new book. I have a question I've been ruminating on. With a formless thought of an idea to create anything, in other words, a product, then do you think that thought contains the wisdom of mind, or perhaps should I say is mind? Then is that in and of itself enough to create the form? Okay, that's going to take a little bit of translating, David. So let me respond to the question I think you're asking, and maybe you can redirect me if I miss the mark. One of the things that I love about this understanding is it unleashes people's creative force. So some people think, well, I'm really creative in this area, but nowhere else. Or people go, well, I'm not creative, I do this. We are all have access to the creative energy of thought. I call thought the Play-Doh of the universe, right? Everything is made of this creative energy. So when you get less caught up in your moment by moment experience, when you hang out more in that space within, that thought comes through, you start to get more and more creative ideas. You start to see more and more possibilities. And because you're not caught up, it becomes quite easy if one catches your eye to do something with it, to play with it, to begin to develop it. And thought becomes form. Sid Banks used to say that thought was the missing link between the formless and the form. All creations begin as an idea in the mind is another way that it's sometimes talked about. So when you have a thought, that's the beginning of a form. So if you have an idea for a business, you have an idea for a product, you have an idea for a book, you have an idea for a painting, you have an idea for a possibility in the world, by kind of being with that, you'll find that it starts to flesh itself out. I sometimes use the analogy of if you take a candle wick and you dip it in hot wax and pull it out, a little bit of the wax will stick to it. And if you let that dry and then stick it back into the hot wax, because it has more of a surface area, when it comes back out, there'll be even more on it. And each time you dip it back in, it comes out with more form, easier to see, and you begin to be able to shape it. And that's how candles are made, or at least how they were made. I don't know if that's still how they're made. Well, it's the same with creation. We start with a simple thought, but each time we take that thought and dip it back in the well, dip it back into the unknown, dip it back into that place before creation, that space within that all ideas come from, it gets a little more form to it. And at some point, if we like the form that it's taking, if we like the shape that it's taking, we can begin to shape it and we can begin to work with it in the world. And that's just how things get created in the world. Whether you understand it or not, that's what you're doing when you, let me brainstorm this. Let me sit with this. I was out with my friends. I was walking the dog and I suddenly thought, I could do this. And the next idea comes. And I was talking to these people and the next idea came. It's that is the creative process. And it all begins with a thought that catches your eye.
So I hope, who was it, David?
It was David. Yeah.
Who was asking that. So if you can just comment, give us a feedback on that.
Yeah, and we've got a nice. Yep, David. Yep, that's the answer I was starting to see. Love the candlewick metaphor. I can see how that works. Wonderful, David.
Well, that's great. That's great. I'm just reading the question that came in now.
Yeah, we can take Razmik. So,
yeah.
Hi, Michael. So when people don't know the inside-out understanding, they fight the dragons whichever way they can. And when they, let's say, do drugs, it's more obvious that they're on the wrong path. But there could be other things, too, that don't seem bad, like studying or working out. What the reference that assuming Razmik is making is, in the space within, I tell the story of, I tell something I call the dragon story. You can find it on YouTube. We've done a little cartoon version of it that was pretty popular. But essentially, it's a way of understanding why we get into bad habits. And the story that I tell is, imagine that you live in a world filled with scary dragons. And in order to protect yourself from the dragons, you try to build castles. So some people build a castle out of success. If I'm successful enough, the dragons won't be able to get me. Some people build a dragon out of education. If I'm smart enough, the dragons won't get me. Some build it out of love. If one person loves me enough, or fame, if enough people love me a little, then I'll be safe from the dragons. Some people do it with money. If I have enough money, the dragons can't get me. Some people do it with power. If I'm in charge, people can't get me. The dragons can't get me. And so there's a lot of castle building that goes on in the world to protect ourselves from the dragons. And then there's also a lot, because a dragon bite or scratch kind of leaves some toxic poison in the system. We drink and we gamble and we have sex and we do whatever it occurs to us to do to help alleviate the discomfort of the dragon poison. Now, if you woke up one morning and realized beyond a shadow of a doubt that there are no dragons, that what looked like dragons were really just shadows, they were just reflections of thought, what would happen to your castles? Well, if you liked the castle you were building, you might still build it, but you wouldn't have that kind of desperation. If I don't get this done by Tuesday, the dragon will get me. You'd be building it because it's kind of fun to build castles. If you were drinking a ton of alcohol, taking a ton of drugs, losing yourself in your work as a way of coping with the dragon poison, when you realize the dragon poison wasn't poison at all, it was just the temporary feeling of a temporary thought. Well, when you don't take the drug, you don't need the antidote. When you don't take the poison, you don't need the antidote. When you don't have the disease, you don't need the cure. And a lot of behaviors, obsessive behaviors, compulsive behaviors, addictive behaviors, fall away. And the most dramatic kind of version of it, even though this isn't the version I tell in the book, was at one point I was working with 3 women in New York City who one was bulimic, 2 were anorexic, or 2 were bulimic, 1 was anorexic. I don't remember, but all 3 of them got over their eating disorder through our work together. And I was approached by a television producer saying, hey, can we do a show, where you cure people's eating disorders? And I was like, no, we can't. Because to be honest, I didn't even know 2 of them had eating disorders. It's just that as they started to see through the illusion of stress that their thinking was creating, and as they woke up to themselves as God, as they woke up to that spiritual nature, that who they were at core, there wasn't anything that they needed food to run away from anymore. And so the behavior fell away. But you can't do it on purpose. It's just that when your thoughts stop looking so real, and when you spend more time in touch with who you really are, life's a lot easier. And so you're less likely to engage in whatever coping mechanisms you've developed over the years.
Well, we're kind of approaching the end of the hour. We have like 50 minutes here. Kind of maybe last question about this is the $1 million question that people are very, very keen to ask. So, everyone who's been listening to this, either this conversation now, or who's been, reading the books about the understanding, the insider understanding, sometimes there is this kind of, I don't know what to call it, like an urge or something to see more, to deepen one's understanding, to see more of it, or see it all the time. And then, it may become a question of, well, what can I do? But there must be something more I can do, or there must be. So is there, what would you say?
Yeah, one of the things that gets bandied about is Sid Banks once said, look in a direction and do nothing, in response to somebody going, hey, what can I do to see more of this? And people have interpreted that in a wide variety of ways, which include, I mustn't do anything. Like I mustn't engage. I must just sit here and let magic happen. I not only do I not think that's what Sid meant, it doesn't work. There isn't anything to do but there is something to see. And what I mean by that is, if I ask you to hear, I don't know if you guys heard the dog barking in the background earlier in the call. Well, there's nothing to do to hear the dog. It's just once your attention is drawn to it, you start to notice it. There's nothing to do to feel the feeling of your bottom on the chair that you're sitting in right now. If you're sitting in a chair, it's just that once your attention is drawn to it, you start to notice it. And in the same way, there's nothing to do to see this more deeply. You just need to notice it more. You need to let your attention to be drawn to it. So one of the reasons I write books is to draw people's attention to it. One of the reasons we're doing this conference is to create an atmosphere in which people can have their attention drawn to it so that they start to see it more and more. And they start to, when you see it, you see it. There's nothing to do. It's like, oh, that's not a real snake. That's a piece of rope. Oh, that's not a real dragon. That's a cloud shaped like a dragon. Once you see it, why would you do anything? Why do you have to do anything about a cloud shaped like a dragon? Why do you have to do anything about a piece of rope on the floor? It's only when it looks like a dragon and it looks like a snake that there's something to do.
So thank you so much for all the questions and comments. Unfortunately, I think we might not have enough time.
Yeah, sorry, because I'm not used to this format. I'm looking over here and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah,
so
I know.
apologize that we couldn't get to all of it.
I was surprised as well, because last year I was doing these webinars with the speakers of the previous conference, and we got like, I don't know, 3 questions, and we had enough time to tackle all of those. But now it's been a big difference. So also for me, it's a new experience here. Yeah. But I want to kind of talk a little bit about the conference, because that was kind of the reason why we set up this webinar. So, as I mentioned in the beginning of the hour, on the 24th and on the 25th of September this year in Helsinki, Finland, here where I'm right now, we're organizing a 2-day conference that's all about what we've been talking about today. So it's all about the inside-out understanding and the 3 principles that create our experience. And so obviously Michael is coming there. I don't know, is this your first time coming to Finland, or have you been?
It will be my first time in Finland. I've spoken in Sweden, and I've spoken in Denmark, and I've spoken in Norway, but I have never spoken in Finland. So okay. I keep getting closer, but I'm finally going to get there.
Yeah, we will. So that's really cool. And besides you, we're going to be joined by George and Linda Bransky and Mara Gleason, and also some of our Nordic kind of pioneers, Erik Grundhusen from Norway and Natasha Sverdlov from Denmark, and then also myself and my colleague Charlotte Ostrom Lund will be talking there. So for anyone who's interested, I'm going to load now this kind of, you should see this kind of offer thing on the side. So you'll, if you click on that, it should take you on our website, so you can find more information about the conference. And we got some early bird offers and that sort of stuff, different ticket options there, which you can take advantage of. So I really wanted to ask you, like, you've been to several events and conferences, seminars, workshops that are based on this understanding. So from your experience, what's kind of different in conferences like this, where everyone is pointing to a different direction than usually? But, yeah.
Well, what I like about the conferences, and I'm not able now. There are so many conferences, I'm not able to attend them all. But what I really like about the conferences, and particularly these conferences, is that you get very different people who are all coming from the same place and pointing in the same direction. So you'll have very different personalities. You'll have people, somebody mentioned about the slow talking, right? You'll have people who talk really slow, and you'll have people like me who still talk kind of fast. And you'll have people who are very focused on creating stuff in the world, and other people who go, forget the world, it's all about your experience. And you'll have people who go, it's all about the mind, and people go, no, it's all about this. But instead of that creating conflict, because everybody is in touch to a greater or lesser extent with this life force, with this spiritual energy, with this God within, with their true nature, and because everyone is pointing towards the truth of life, the truth behind experience as best they see it, it actually creates a richer picture. So in the same way, as I said at the beginning, the space within is, I've written about the principles in 3 different ways, or 2 and a third coming, so that you can create a more 3-dimensional picture of the space. Well, that's what going to a conference is. It's a chance to hear the same thing said differently enough times that at some point, some of it goes in. Whereas if you just have one speaker, it's very easy. You can go quite deep. I mean, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't do events, but it's very easy to make it about the speaker. And when you have lots of different speakers, it's sometimes easier to make it about you. So that's why you would go to the conference, for you.
I'm just gonna. Yeah. So if kind of people are, for anyone who's listening to this, kind of resonating what we're talking about, this is a great opportunity to immerse yourself into this conversation even more for 2 whole days. And as Michael said, there's going to be different speakers, different styles, different ways of communicating about the same understanding. And really what we as speakers are doing there is our very best to point you somewhere, and then trusting that you kind of takes the step, or it's not really taking anything. Again, I was kind of phrasing that as something to do, but it's more like you come there, you sit down, and you listen for 2 days. And what seems to happen is that as the weekend goes forward, people's mind tends to quiet down. And it's amazing because when you have a room full of people who don't have much on their minds, which is to say they don't have much personal thinking going on, they're just very present, they're there. It's amazing what happens in the kind of feeling in the room. This kind of collective, nice, deep feeling in the room, and it's just very enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I'm thinking like if you go to a football match, people who like to go to football matches, there's something kind of awesome about all those people all focused on one thing, or a great rock concert or something like that. Well, it's the same kind of thing, except that everyone's going inward. So it's like an amplifying chamber. So you feel the peace that you feel for yourself, but it's somehow amplified because you're all going into that space together. And that is part of the fun of it.
One of our speakers, Eric, called it a spa for the mind. I think it's quite nice. And people then, after last year's event, when we asked for feedback, people kind of said, "Oh yeah, this really was a spa for the mind." So if you kind of want to take a break from for the mind, some peace of mind, this is a good way for that as well. We got 5 more minutes.
Yeah, is there another, was there a particular question that was floating around on the side? I'm trying not to...
There's one. Yeah, I want to take it because a couple of people have been asking it. Someone asked it, and then someone else said, can you tackle it? Well, it was about relationships. So if, I can't find it right now, but it was something about so we don't actually have a relationship with the other person. We have a relationship with our thinking of the person. So
relationships are really fun area to see this in, because you're either in your thinking or you're in love, right? That's another way of saying what we've been saying. And when you're in your thinking, you can try to love the person, but you're loving a sock puppet, like, that you're having conversations with in your head. Like, we've all had conversations with our partners in our head, and that relationship between you and the imaginary person in your head, that one never really goes anywhere. When you can be really present with another human being, you fall in love. Now, I'm as likely to fall in love with you as I am with my wife, as I am with my baby, as I am with my dog, in that space. So it's not about, love stops being the delineator for how to choose who to be in relationship with, and just becomes a way of being in the world. And then relationship becomes about enjoyment. It becomes about fun. It becomes about partnership. It becomes about play. It becomes about hanging out. And when there isn't that pressure on your relationship to provide love, because love is your nature, love is who you are when you're not up in your head, then suddenly you can have a lot of fun with people. And for me, even though my wife and I had already been together for, we'd probably been together 18 years before I came across the principles, I don't think we have enjoyed each other more than we have in the last 9 years. And so for me, the great liberation is to see, hey, I can be in love with anybody just by being present with them. But if I want to be in a sexual relationship, or I want to be in a friendship, or I want to be in a business relationship, well, that's about working together towards a common aim, or about enjoying each other's company. And you can have a lot of fun with people in love.
Well, yeah. So I think it's time to wrap up this webinar. First, I want to thank. Yeah, this is recorded, so it's going to be the same link. You can just share the link that you found somewhere to log into this webinar. You can share the link, and people can watch this webinar later. So I just really want to thank everyone who's been watching this, and for your comments and questions and everything. We love you too. and I want to thank you, Michael, for doing this. And I'm so grateful and honored that you're coming to our event here.
I'm really excited.
I think I was kind of, when I sent you an email back, it was last year, the invitation to come to speak, I really didn't know what to expect. What are you going to say? I know you're a busy man, and you have a lot of events, and this is literally on the other side of the world for you. So it takes a bit of traveling, because teleportation is not quite there yet. So I'm really, really excited and grateful that you're coming there, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we would love to see many of you there. So this was the first pre-conference webinar. I'm going to do other ones as well. Maybe we'll do one more in summer, because there's so many questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So maybe we'll do one more as well, and then I'm going to do one with George and Linda and the other speakers. So you can just join those as well, even if you're not coming to that conference. And yeah, so that's all.
By the way, guys, sorry if we look distracted, but there's just this stream of really nice comments and people saying nice things about us over there. It just keeps catching my eyes, like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nico. That was great. And I'm going to plug it one last time. Out today.
Yeah. Highly recommend it. The Space Within. Go on Amazon or wherever and get it now. And then go to the conference website and book your place there.
Yeah, and I'll look forward to seeing many of you there, hopefully.
Yeah, so goodbye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.